Many tales are crafted and spread through the long-standing tradition of storytelling within the Ozark region. But one of the most interesting tales to be told is that of how the Howler became a legend. Welcome back to the dark side. If you have not already watched the first part of our journey, where we search for the elusive creature known as the Ozark Howler, I highly suggest you do so. You'll find a link to that video in the pinned comment and on the icon located in the top portion of your screen. Our trek so far has been winding, and that won't change here. Today we delve into just how the Ozark Howler gained notoriety. Author and cryptozoologist Lauren Coleman, whose work we have discussed in previous videos, holds an important role in the story of the Ozark Howler. From his writings and previous explanations, he vehemently categorizes the Howler as a hoax. Coleman outlines in a blog post from 2006 that for over a decade, there were numerous attempts to legitimize the Ozark Howler. In 1998, with the dawning of increased internet use and popularity, websites outlining a mysterious creature known as the Ozark Howler began cropping up in droves. He and other researchers began receiving numerous messages and emails pertaining to the Howler. Conflicting reports of this creature were sent to researchers as well as being published online. Some of them described an animal with shaggy hair which could be observed standing, while others described something akin to a bear but having a thick, long tail. Coleman would go on to provide a previously unreleased excerpt of his findings, which detail the tracking and investigation into the sudden uprising of the Ozark Howler legend. According to one website in 1998, Ozark Howler investigators were already feuding. It stated, "The Ozark Howler Research Council was recently established after several members of the Howler Research Group found that they had serious disagreements with the core group organization over the interpretation of Ozark Howler evidence. The Ozark Howler Research Council, OHRC for short, is dedicated to the comprehensive evaluation of existing evidence and exploration for new evidence of the Howler." Veteran cryptozoologists who had never heard of this alleged creature were suspicious. At a website called Researching the Ozark Howler, investigators found a statement that there is a cryptozoology web ring owned by the Howler Research Group. The site described the alleged cryptid pretty much the same as other sites had. The creature that locals called the Ozark Howler is a cat-like beast with black shaggy fur and a distinctive call that is heard at dusk. The Howler has been sighted numerous times over the last 8 years in northern Arkansas and southern Missouri. Some reports claim that it also has horns and a thick beard like a goat's. The website named an investigator. The primary researcher of the Howler is Izajoke, a distinguished professor of biology at Buffalo River University in eastern Oklahoma. The site carries photographs supposedly of the Howler taken by Mr. Lee Hardiman from St. Louis as he was driving home from a weekend in Branson, Missouri. A creature with red eyes and horns, a professor named Izajoke, get it? It's a joke, from a non-existent university? The fake names continued: P.T. Fuel, D. Goner, and R. Nixon, all of the so-called Ozark Howler Research Group. An individual by the name of Fred Sprout took to the East Cougar email list and began bombarding the email group with absurd and frivolous claims. Many of those receiving the outlandish correspondence did not fall for whatever Sprout was hoping to gain, but there were some that did. Others tried to understand who was really behind all this and why the person or persons was going to such extremes to establish and spread the making of this cryptid. Various fake sightings began being posted at an increased rate, and all of them under suspicious names. If the goal was to get seasoned researchers to take the bait, it worked. With so many sightings going up on blogs and research sites already dedicated to other cryptids, along with the continued bombardment of emails, some researchers began making their own websites dedicated to the Ozark Howler, or included Howler information on their already existing sites. One of the very early emailers was Jonathan C. Cook, who said he was with the University of Memphis, which may or may not be true. Claiming to be writing an article on the Howler for Strange magazine, he urged readers to go to the site locations for further information on the creature. When he learned of Cook's assertion about the Strange assignment, the magazine editor denied any association when asked for verification from cryptozoologist Loren Coleman. Cook seemed especially interested in seeing to it that Loren Coleman put an entry on the Ozark Howler in the cryptozoology book he was writing with Jerome Clark. Unfortunately for him, Cook made the mistake of picking the real name of a prominent doctor in Memphis and using it as the name on one of the Howler email inquiries. Coleman called the doctor's office and confirmed that the physician had nothing to do with the message or the Howler story, allegedly. Coleman confronted Cook, who agreed to confess fully if Coleman did not use the real doctor's name. Scratching backwards into the websites, Coleman soon found that numerous aliases had been employed. The deception was deep and complicated, even including a multiple-month online design to fool investigators. Late in May 1998, Cook told Coleman why he had done what he did. He said, "Visiting a skeptic's chat room on the internet one night a few months ago, I started talking about how ridiculous the whole Chupacabra's mythology is. He wondered what would happen if he created a new cryptid, if many people would fall for it. It would kind of be fun to undermine the credibility of monster tales like Bigfoot and the Chupa." Cook fashioned a chain of false fronts of free web pages and email accounts, and the rest is an episode in the history of faux cryptozoology. In 1998, when Loren Coleman and his co-author Jerome Clark submitted their manuscript of the now entitled work Cryptozoology A to Z to the editors at Simon & Schuster, 25% of the draft was deleted to keep the book affordable. Along with several other sections, the Ozark Howler excerpt found its way onto the chopping block. Because it was the hoaxer's intent to trick Coleman with a story so good that Coleman had to include it in his writings, it was left out by the editors. Ultimately, the cautionary tale of the Ozark Howler hoax was wiped away, never to make it into the final draft. Chad Arman, a researcher and author who was also one of the first to receive emails from the hoaxer, describes three basic categories of cryptozoology hoaxes. The first is targeting an innocent party. The second category involves setting up fake evidence for investigators to follow. And lastly, depending on how you look at it, the most difficult or the most simple is to tell a story. Something that seems to be no problem for people when the Ozark Howler is the subject. As you'll come to find out, that was not the end of this sordid tale. While tracking the evidence and findings of the alleged hoax, another was found. This one elaborates upon the original hoax with similar findings, but it also has a few details changed. Lisa Lee, a news correspondent, supposedly brought to light a hoax perpetrated upon the cryptozoology community. Rumors brought forth by Bigfoot researchers began to spread throughout the community that in 1994, a student at the University of Arkansas took a bet with members of a rival fraternity to convince the local NBC News affiliate to run a story about a mysterious creature being seen. Not wanting their brother to lose the bet, the entire fraternity helped him to concoct the Ozark Howler legend. After digging into the story of the hoax, Lee found that there were discrepancies. The Bigfoot researcher stated that the student invented the Ozark Howler in 1994, but belief in the howler dated back to the 1800s. The university student and the fraternity were never identified, and the Bigfoot researchers, who were said to have had a conversation with the student, could not provide notes from that conversation or any evidence that such a call took place. In conclusion of her investigation, Lee was said to have determined that a double hoax occurred. Bigfoot researchers, who were worried about the increasing popularity of the Ozark Howler and the stagnation of Bigfoot attention, which had hit its peak in the 70s, were said to have created the false story of the student's hoax in order to discredit the howler. And so, a double hoax ensued. If it ever existed, seemingly all evidence of this investigation has been lost to time. Blogs that once contained links to the journalist's archived work are seemingly no longer accessible, even through the Wayback Machine. and searching through various newspapers, clippings, and the archives of news stations provided no evidence to substantiate that this investigation ever took place. It would seem more likely that Coleman's description of people attempting to discredit the fact that the Ozark Howler is a hoax is true. And this story is just another one of mysterious origins, one that you can follow and follow, but never truly leads to any point of certainty. While the many aspects of uncertainty that follow this creature could make it easier to accept false stories as truth and dismiss potentially legitimate elements, there seem to be too many inconsistencies with this story. How can we take any of this as truth when the Howler's story contradicts itself at every twisted turn? It was said that many tried to discredit Loren Coleman and other researchers' findings of the original hoax, so perhaps this is just another attempt at that goal. Something you'll find when you research the Ozark Howler is a small piece of information about Vance Randolph's mention of the name Hoo-Hoo in a book he wrote. It should be noted that Randolph never mentions the name Hoo-Hoo in regards to the Ozark Howler. Instead, it is in association with the creatures known as Wampus cats. But all the same, the Hoo-Hoo is a creature that roams the Ozarks, one that Ozark folk know well, and one that some individuals say is another name for the Ozark Howler. Finding the book in question is quite easy, as Vance Randolph's work is popular, mostly for his extensive compiling of folklore, folk songs, and categorizing of Ozark stories. Randolph was a self-educated folklorist. Born in Pittsburgh, Kansas in 1892, he was educated as a scientist with an undergraduate degree in biology and a graduate degree in psychology. In 1920, after having moved to the Ozarks, he began writing about Ozark folklore. In 1941, he was asked to make field recordings for the Archive of American Folk Song at the Library of Congress. He accepted, and ultimately, by the end, he compiled 870 selections on 198 discs for the Library of Congress. He also collected and released numerous pieces of writing, which included folk stories, songs, and poems from the Ozark people. Located within the collection of his writing, you'll find the book, We Always Lie to Strangers, Tall Tales from the Ozarks. It is a collection of stories Randolph pieced together from various tales told. His reference of the Hoo-Hoo is a short one, but still of significant interest. A man who worked in timber near Waldron, Arkansas, told me that the lumbermen down the way were always joking about the whistling wampus, also known as the Whistler. This was supposed to be an immense black cat with supernatural intelligence, which lured woodsmen to their doom by whistling at them from dark cedar thickets. When a timber worker was asked where he had been or required to account for an unexplained absence, he answered that he had been out hunting the Whistler. Another fellow in the same vicinity said that lumbermen all over the country belonged to a secret society called the Hoo-Hoo, and that the name represents the beguiling cry of the whistling wampus. According to the guidebook Arkansas, the Concatenated Order of Hoo-Hoo was organized at Gurdon, Arkansas in 1892. Old newspaper files tell of a national convention held by the Order of Hoo-Hoo in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, January 29, 1906. From this excerpt of the book, it's not difficult to know our next point of exploration. What is this Concatenated Order of Hoo-Hoo? Is it a simple one-off reference or something more? Well, to people interested in the Ozark Howler online, those who post information on blogs and speak about it on various mediums, it's not. It's another avenue one can place speculation and use to write well-crafted tales of the Ozark Howler. The Concatenated Order of Hoo-Hoo was founded on January 21, 1892 in Gurdon, Arkansas, when a group of men had traveled there to catch a train to their next destination after attending the meeting of the Arkansas Yellow Pine Manufacturers Association. Unfortunately for them, the train was delayed for a few hours, which meant the men would have to wait. And while doing so, 2 of the 5 discussed the idea of creating a unified lumber fraternity, whereby all lumbermen could come together to discuss various aspects of the trade, rather than having to attend various conventions in different cities at different times. With more discussion about the potential fraternity with the rest of the group, the Concatenated Order of Hoo-Hoo took shape. In a 1982 article from the Argus newspaper, Russell McLean, a retired psychology professor, mayor of Gurdon, Arkansas, and member of the order, was quoted saying, "There are all kinds of stories about where they got the name. The name originates from when one of the founders discovered a tuft of hair standing curled and greased on another member's head and dubbed it hoo-hoo. According to the order's history, the term hoo-hoo was coined by founding member Bowling Arthur Johnson, and it became a catchphrase of sorts amongst the group of men a month or so before the order came to be. As the Concatenated Order of Hoo-Hoo was new and had no history of its own, it took on references and some traditions from various cultures, more specifically Egyptian culture, and many of the revered symbols found their way into the order. It adopted a black cat as its symbol, and as the cat symbolically has 9 lives, the number can be found throughout the order in various references, such as the annual meeting being on the 9th day of the 9th month, or the initiation fee being $9.99. Of course, as the years have gone on, prices have changed, but the number 9 always finds its way into them. Their member and initiation robes have the symbolic black cat on them, and their headquarters is shadowed by the black cat logo front and center, along with the order's motto, to foster health, happiness, and long life. So what does the order have to do with the Ozark Howler? Other than the potential hoo-hoo name similarity and affinity for black cats, and the vague reference in Vance Randolph's book? Seemingly nothing, unless you were to get taken in by what is meant to be a comical exploration and tying of Wampus cats to the Concatenated Order of Hoo-Hoo and some of its potentially most famous members. If you must know, this may be one of the most outlandish stories or conspiracies you will come across in terms of the Ozark Howler. According to a few blog posts, there is a specific member of the Concatenated Order of Hoo-Hoo that is of great importance to the legend of the Howler, President Theodore Roosevelt. The order's purpose was supposedly not as innocuous as we previously discussed. It was meant to manage the roaming howler and deal with the potential dangers it may bring. It was said that the group, specifically Roosevelt, set up zones where the howler population could roam free and avoid the growing number of homes along the forest outskirts. And the conspiracies don't stop there. Not only was Roosevelt a member, but so was Warren G. Harding, again another president who held office several terms after Theodore Roosevelt had left. This conspiracy goes as such. The order had lost much of its funding after Roosevelt left office, and although he was planning to run for president again, his outlook on the Ozark Howler had changed drastically since his first 2 terms in office. While meeting the order in 1919 to strategize his potential nomination as frontrunner for the Republican Party, Roosevelt announced that the American people should know about the howler and that it should or could become the national animal, replacing the eagle. He felt that if he, an avid hunter and woodsman, caught and mounted the howler to his train engine, he could show just how much of an American hero he could be and garner even more support from the public. The order was against this, as the focus of the group was to protect, contain, and investigate the Ozark Howler. After the meeting, older order members met with member 14945, also known as Warren G. Harding, an up-and-coming but relatively unknown person both within the order and politics. They wanted him to replace Roosevelt as the Republican nominee. Harding agreed, and Roosevelt died in January 1919. Harding would go on to win the presidency and was inducted on March 4, 1921. Not as concerned with forest and national land conservation as Roosevelt had been, and very much a people-pleaser, Harding gave in to lobbyists and announced support for a bill that included a provision for geological extraction in the Ozark Forest. Harding would go on to die in his presidential hotel room in San Francisco under unknown circumstances. He died in room 8064 of the Palace Hotel, which was renovated sometime after his death, and the number was supposedly changed to 888 by some influence of the order. It was done so with intent, as Roosevelt's member number was 999. Now, if we're to take this at face value, we are meant to think that the Concatenated Order of Hoo-Hoo was a secret order made to manage and protect the Ozark Howler's existence, and that 2 presidents, both not following the agreements made with the order, died under mysterious circumstances at the hands of the order. This could all be far-fetched speculation, creative writing 101, or perhaps someone knows something we don't, but more than likely it's a combination of the first 2. That seems to be a common thing with the lore of the Ozark Howler. And there is some truth within the post speaking about the conspiracy, but isn't that the case with most conspiracies? Ones that hold some truth, even the faintest bit, seem more believable. Roosevelt was a frontrunner for the 1920 election, but that was lost when he died suddenly on January 6, 1919, after having developed breathing problems the night prior, although his health had been declining for years. Ultimately, his death was attributed to a blood clot which detached and traveled to his lungs. Warren G. Harding would become president, but died suddenly in August 1923 while his wife was reading to him in bed. At the time, it was considered to be death by cerebral hemorrhage, although it is now speculated that he died of cardiac arrest because there was no autopsy completed and doctors did not have the understanding of the general symptoms of cardiac arrest. He had also been sick for several days prior to his death while traveling for speeches and addresses. Of course, all of this seems rather unbelievable, and there are no resources, references, or materials provided to substantiate any claims the Post was making. The article itself makes the mistake of stating Roosevelt met with order members in the spring of 1919, but that could not have possibly happened as he died in January of that very year. Yes, Harding and Roosevelt were both members of quote-unquote secret societies, such as the Freemasons and the Concatenated Order of Hoo-Hoo. But as much as some of their activities are unknown, many of them are known. It may be grasping at straws in creative writing to think any of this is legitimate. But should I go missing, maybe the secret society got me. The true interest in the Ozark Howler's legend seems to come more from the hoaxes that have been perpetrated in its name. And perhaps the hoax goes on, or at the very least, dubious storytelling done in its favor. This whole excursion into the fictional basis of the Secret Order of Hoo-Hoo brings us back to Vance Randolph. He tells us in the text of his book, and even from the title, they are tall tales. Works of fiction meant to create a fantasy so beguiling that it lives on and is passed by word of mouth. Or, in our more modern era, by posting on the internet to blog sites and wiki pages. Perhaps Ozark storytelling has inspired a new set of tall tale tellers. As the presidential Hoo-Hoo conspiracy shows just how imaginative people can be, so does our next stop along this trek through Ozark lore. There's one small wrinkle in the story of the Ozark Howler that needs to be discussed. A book was supposedly printed by a local group in the 1930s. It was a collection of Howler stories, sightings, poetry, and folklore that, due to being sequestered, had not been read again until 2019 when it was republished. The book speaks of events such as the Russellville Church Fire, the Hoo-Hoo Order, and other occasions of individuals' interpretations of experiences with the Ozark Howler. The interesting thing about this book is not necessarily what is in it, but the facts surrounding its existence and subsequent advertisement. Names of individuals within the book could not be tracked down, listing of archives could not be found, and much of what was written could not be substantiated, much like most of the Ozark Howler story. The author/editor of the original work published in the 1930s, Saul Ashton, also does not seem to exist. Even with the rather detailed background of the man's life, including his real name, the names of people in his life, important life dates, which were provided in the foreword of the book, did not help in building any credibility that he existed. Searching records of the name he adopted, Saul, and his given birth name, Paul, bring up no results. I'm sure I don't have to mention the reference that lies behind the names Paul and Saul. Some of you will understand that one. Searching the list of family members of Saul Ashton, such as his granddaughter, Sophia Ashton, or her father, Saul's son Henry, who were both named in the book, give no indication that these people are real or that any of what is written could be taken as truth, or at the very least, even the writings of people who may be giving creativity to their lives. Other researchers have found that the 2019 editor and publisher Hawthorne Cornice seemingly does not exist either. And this is where I request that you stay with me as we dig further into this rabbit hole. If you have watched some of the previous videos on this channel, you know that we try to do as much extensive research as we can within the limits of the channel's available means. In order to get a better picture of where this book came from and why it was suddenly published, we need to explore where it was first noted. Wiki pages are a good first stop of research. They can give you a cursory glance at what a topic is and usually provide good reference material to take your research further. In this case, that was not available, so instead, we look at where the reference of this book came from and who posted it. If you were to check on the editing history, you will find that a user, Ralph Ozark, added a few details to the Ozark Howler's Cryptids wiki page on March 10, 2019. These changes included adding the name Hoo-Hoo and Devil Cat to its list of known aliases, a link to an article about the British folklore dogs, such as the Church Grim and Black Shuck, and a few other edits as well. You'll also notice that Ralph mentions that Vance Randolph alluded that Hoo-Hoo is another name for the Ozark Howler in his book Ozark Superstitions. Let's be clear here. Randolph does not mention the name Hoo-Hoo in regards to the Ozark Howler. Randolph does mention the name Hoo-Hoo, as we've seen earlier in his book We Always Lie to Strangers, Tall Tales from the Ozarks, but it is not in connection with the creature known as the Ozark Howler. Instead, it is reference to the myth of the Wampus Cats and the Concatenated Order of Hoo-Hoo, which lumbermen use as an excuse to get away with taking a bit of respite from work. The most meaningful contribution Ralph Ozark added to the page was the information stating, in the 1930s, a local press published a small run of a book of folklore about the creature called Tales of the Ozark Howler. About 2 months later, on May 11, 2019, Ralph Ozark returned to put an Amazon link to said book that was being reprinted. The book itself, based on its Amazon listing, started being republished on May 9, 2019, only 2 days before Ralph added the link. This was rather strange, and even more strange was the fact that when you purchase and receive the book, you'll find on the very last page 3 lines that read, "Made in the USA, Middletown, Delaware," and a date. The date in the back of my book was January 10th, 2023. How could the book be made on January 10th, 2023 when it was published in 2019? And why was the printing date only a few days after the book was ordered? Well, come to find out that with Amazon, authors of all genres can self-publish through the print-on-demand service that Amazon offers. It can be a benefit to those authors and illustrators who may not have the funds to self-publish and send out orders, and may be advantageous for those that may not want to go through the process of finding a publisher willing to take on their manuscript and having to edit their work to meet certain requirements for publication. If an author were to self-publish through Amazon, all they need to do is submit a PDF file of their work. Depending on what price they are willing to pay, authors can even choose the publisher name. And after providing that and the listing information, voila, they now have a published work. So where do we go from here? Well, as stated earlier, none of the individuals mentioned in the book's collection of writings could be tracked down, including the original editor, Saul Ashton, and the newest publisher, Hawthorne Cornice. Taking a look back at the Amazon page, we can see the frequently bought together section. As of this recording, Amazon has not provided what analytics or formula they use to choose which items become grouped in the frequently bought together section. We can assume it's based on any number of things, such as people legitimately buying items at the same time, or topics that both items entail, which are similar, or that they could be potentially from the same seller. If we click on the other book that is listed in the frequently bought together section, we see it's another Ozark Howler book, and would you look at that, the name of the author just so happens to be Ralph Toller. This is where I must say to my fellow wanderers that I wish I could have stopped digging, but something about the name Ralph was bothering me. I felt as though I had seen the name before. After taking several days to ponder on it, as I began writing the script, I came to the aha moment. Ralph is not only the person who added the information and book link to the Cryptids wiki page, he's written several blog posts I came across previously. Do you remember the Russellville church story? Well, guess who wrote about that? Yes, Ralph Torrent to be more exact. In a post made on Medium, he wrote about the Ozark Howler and its potential ties to British folklore and its church fire event. Another article which he posted, you'll find that he outlined the Two Wizards podcast, which covers the very comical connection between Teddy Roosevelt and the Hoo-Hoo Order. And on the sidebar of his Medium.com pieces, he links to his own blog, or one which he contributes to, which details Ozark Howler information. On that very site, you'll find the post about the Hoo-Hoo conspiracy regarding Theodore Roosevelt and Warren G. Harding. Looking through the edit history, you can see that Ralph never posted or edited the Cryptids wiki page after May 11th, 2019. Though we can make that assumption for most people using it after something they are interested in somewhat fizzles out. Now you might be thinking, Nessie, this seems a bit far-fetched. And yes, I agree. If all of these are the same Ralph, then it's a bit suspicious. Of what? I'm not sure. How can we ever truly know the motives behind someone's actions? Perhaps he is just an enthusiastic amateur folklorist like some of the rest of us and got carried away. There's no real right or wrong way to go about posting to wiki pages, or even your own blog site. Of course, there are some hard no's and should not do's, and some etiquette on the internet, as we all know. And if I'm being quite honest, if he and the editor / self-publisher of the Amazon book, that 1930s reprint, are one and the same, it's actually a creative piece. It takes time, effort, and creativity to put a book together of any kind. But to possibly portray that book as an actual compilation of real folklore told by very specific individuals, or to never outright say that it's a work of fiction, the line then starts to blur from creative to dubious. While you, my fellow wanderers, know I try to stay on the side of neutrality when it comes to folklore and cryptids, allowing each of us to draw our own conclusions, this one got me. It drew me in, I latched onto it, and would not let go until I found the very end. But even as I record this, I have the lingering sense that I am still far from that end, far from the truth. And perhaps that should be a warning in and of itself. It's seemingly like pulling a loose thread on a sweater. Eventually, the carefully woven pattern is dismantled, and all that's left behind is the frayed pile of thread. But what happens when that thread never ends? When you pull and pull and pull? How do you find a way to stop before you find yourself entangled in the very thread you once had control of? With the remoteness of the Ozarks, how unlikely is it that there aren't big cats roaming the dense forests that have gone seemingly unseen or undocumented? With the changing landscapes and encroachment of human civilization on areas of wildlife, it wouldn't be surprising to see various species migrating to find new safe land or food sources. And with that, possible adaptations of their appearance or behaviors to blend in with their new environments could happen. So maybe the howler isn't some hellhound or gigantic cat out to fill you with terror. Maybe our imaginations can get the best of us at times, and what was once an old folklore tale has morphed into a way to keep creativity alive. There's one line that sums up this journey, and it just so happens to come from Ralph Ozark. Whatever the truth of the Ozark Howler, it has inspired generations of artists and writers. From Ozark folklore to conspiracies and hoaxes, the Ozark Howler is a topic which can inspire anyone, whether their intentions are for a bit of fun, serious inquiry, or something more nefarious. The hoax is clear, the stories that follow, not so much. Sometimes it may be more interesting to allow the veil to cover our eyes and believe that something like the Ozark Howler truly does exist. And maybe, just maybe, the stories of fearsome panthers from the old Ozark settlers live on in the tale of the Ozark Howler. That history of storytelling and mesmerizing those who will listen has not been lost. So I pose these questions to you, dear wanderer. What makes a story reliable? What do we take as fact? And what do we deem fiction when it comes to beasts such as these? Are they undiscovered animals or something supernatural? How do we not allow our imaginations to haze our objective perspectives? And how do we stop ourselves from falling into the lure of the Howler's Call? That took so long. Thank you so much for listening and watching. This one was a journey, a very long journey that I am very, very glad is over. I don't even have words anymore. My mind is gone after researching and writing this and recording it for you guys. Ozark folklore is really, it's something, because just reading Randolph's book, like just pieces of it, as I was researching, it's very interesting. So if you have the time or you want to look more into it, I really do suggest looking at Vance Randolph's work. Maybe you'll find something in there that interests you besides the Ozark legend and the myths of big cats and things like that, because there's so much more in those books besides just the big cat myth and things like the hoo-hoo order and all that. And oh my goodness, if I had to say hoo-hoo one more time. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. YouTube appreciates when you do that. I appreciate more than YouTube. But yeah, let me know your thoughts about the video. And thank you again for listening. And as always, until next time, stay safe and stay spooky.